Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I don't know if you guys are sick of us yet. You might be. You probably
It's the
are.
European extravaganza.
But we are back to Europe again. I know we've been dragging our feet on these episodes, and you're going to get them all here before the new year hits. So tonight, Danny, we're going to be looking at two smaller parks. We're going to be looking at Tripsdrill and Holiday Park with the big former Thrilling 32 champion, Expedition GeForce. So I'm curious to see what your opinion on that ride is, to see maybe if it's good enough, it could maybe win that championship again. I don't think so. Steel Vengeance has got this tied up for the next foreseeable future. Anyway, we are going to start with Tripsdrill since...
No, other way around.
No, we're going to talk right about Holiday Park. We're going to talk about right about Expedition GeForce because I want to know.
So I set Andy up for failure here because we've been talking about how on most of these we've been saving like the big ride to talk to about the end, and and I said that we were going to switch it this time around. So we're going to talk about Expedition GeForce right away because we're going to talk about these parks in the order we went.
There's really nothing else at Holiday Park that's really talk about here, right?
No, I mean, they have three coasters. They have Tabalugas Achterbahn, which is their indoor kiddie coaster that's in their indoor wintry snow-themed area, which is nice. Sky Scream is their Skyrocket 2 clone, sort of in the very back of the park. The only other thing at Holiday Park that's really worth noting is God, it's escaping me now. The Burj Falkenstein. That's what it's called. It's their dark.
How'd you forget that? Like, oh, you're such an idiot. Oh, how did you forget that?
Burj Falkenstein is the name of their. So it's actually modeled after Falkenstein Castle, I believe it looks like. And I think the translation is Burj, I think, is death. So Burj Falkenstein is their dark ride. And basically what happens here is you're going through the castle. It's sort of this omni-mover dark ride, haunted mansion style dark ride where you're going through the different scenes in the castle. And so we talked a little bit about how things are very different in Europe. So you sort of go through like the dungeon areas and whatnot. And of course, towards the end of the ride, you go through like a bedroom where there's blood all over the bed sheets and whatnot, and there's a woman wrapped up in like a bloody towel, and what does she do? She drops the towel and flashes you with her animatronic boobs. So so and not to bury the hatchet here, but we're going to be talking more about the German log flume with boobs that's at Erlebnis Park Tripsdrill. So this is sort of the boobs episode of European.
Oh, Rob Dole! Finally, Rob Dole is show for you.
So if there's one reason to go to Europe, folks, there is lots more boobs in their theme park rides than what we are used to. They also
right now there's like none. There's like
yeah,
none.
right.
Like,
no, that's it. It's exactly.
Like Pirates of the Caribbean is like the closest you get. I think they took her out. So
yeah, that's pretty much it, right? They do have a log flume at Holiday Park, which is good as well. Has some forwards, backwards, forwards action with reverser tables, which is pretty cool. Very wet, so if you're a log flume guy or girl, certainly Holiday Park has a very good offering for you. But Andy, of course, the only reason that coaster nerds might be venturing to Holiday Park is for the one, the only, Expedition GeForce. Former Thrilling 32 champion, considered by many for many, many years to be the best roller coaster in Europe. And quite simply, Andy, that it certainly is one of the best roller coasters in Europe. There is no doubt about it. This, for me, was number one on my most anticipated list, purely because of the reputation and the longevity of how long it's been around. I talked about it on the Wallaby Holland show. When I got off of Untamed, I said to Adam and Sue, I said, I don't think we will ride a better ride on this entire trip. And I don't think we did. Untamed was my favorite steel coaster on the entire trip, but Expedition GeForce was a very close second. And up until the construction of Untamed in 2019, I do believe that Expedition GeForce truly is the best coaster in Europe, at least that I've ridden. The best coaster in Europe for all of that time since it opened in 2001 up until 2019. I can't, certainly none of the other rides on this trip. There's Nemesis fans out there. I personally rank Nemesis a little bit higher, but it's also a little bit of a sentimental thing. In terms of the best roller coaster in Europe, Expedition GeForce has been that, certainly, for close to 20 years. Let's describe this for you. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Where do we start? I had heard a lot of people say if you took a ride like Superman at Six Flags New England and put the Millennium Force trains and T-bar style restraints like Superman used to have on it, that's very similar to what Expedition GeForce is. And I think that is a very, very accurate description of what this ride is. The airtime is stronger than the airtime on Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. That is without a doubt. The trains are much more comfortable. They are the Millennium Force restraints with the T-bars and the low backrest seats. They are probably one of the most common things that you could have on a roller coaster. I mean, Millennium Force has proven that. But this ride has all of the extreme negative G-forces that people wish Millennium Force had. Millennium Force has a couple of really nice airtime moments. Are they out of this world intense? No. There's a couple of good spots of floater air bordering on ejector airtime. Expedition GeForce just has tons and tons and tons of ejector airtime. It's if you take so Maverick does the drop and then the Sidewinder hills and has that really strong airtime hill after the Sidewinder turns just before the two inversion. Every single straight airtime hill on Expedition GeForce is as intense or more than that Maverick airtime hill. If you take for the Six Flags New England people and the Superman the Ride people, you have the drop on Superman the Ride, and then you have the second hill, which has very good airtime. Then you have the turnaround, the overbank turn, and then you have consecutive airtime hills. That the second of those two consecutive airtime hills, which I guess is the fourth hill overall on the ride. Some people say that is one of the best airtime hills in the world. Expedition GeForce has 7 hills that are as good or better than that single hill. And to boot, has one of the best first drops on any roller coaster in the world.
That's what I've heard about too. Is that first drop is just outstanding the way it curves.
And let it be said that it is the best on the back left seat. You can sit on the right side, and it's still good. But picture this: imagine being thrown out of your seat like you are on the back row of any big first drop, like on a Millennium Force, or I wouldn't even make a comparison to Millennium Force. I would say compare it to like a Wicked Cyclone or a Steel Vengeance, where you're in the back seat and you're getting that floating airtime where you're being thrown out of your seat. And then halfway down, just make a really quick 90-degree turn to the right and you get thrown out to the left. It is ejector airtime. It is lateral force airtime being thrown out of your seat. It is one of the craziest sensations on a first drop anywhere. I'm trying to think. I've always been a big fan of the Leviathan first drop. I've always been a fan of the wing over drops on the wing coasters. I've always been a fan of Maverick Drop, even though it's not that big. I cannot think of, for me personally, I cannot think of a first drop on a roller coaster that I could even try to argue is as good as this one when you're in that back left seat. If you're in the front and you're on the right side, it's a nice first drop. It's fine. It really doesn't have that overly special feeling to it. But when you're in that magic seat on the back left, it is without a doubt the craziest first drop on a coaster with a traditional lift hill, in my opinion. And then you have some very strong positive G's at the bottom of the first drop, almost gray out worthy, and it's a very steep first hill, and the drops and the rises on the Airtime hills on this ride are very steep, and the crests and apexes, the apex of each of those hills. Not an English teacher, not an English major. Apices? I don't know. Whatever the plural of apex is, the apex of each of these hills is very, very tight. So what you get is not only very strong ejector airtime, but you get a lot of sustained ejector airtime. I'm talking 3 to 5 seconds of strong ejector airtime over this hill. So you do the second hill, and you do the overbank turn with some pretty good positive G-forces. You then hit another airtime hill, which is even smaller than the one before it and is even more intense than the second hill, that third hill is. Then you do an overbank turn, and you turn around. Here is when, so after that second overbank turn, you make a left-hand overbank turn. This is the point in the ride where if you watch a POV, you say to yourself, well, that could be something just a little bit better. And this is the only part of the ride where I think that is true. Expedition GeForce is very, very nearly a perfect ride. In the same sense that Karen, if you go way back to the Fantasialand show, I talked about how Karen is very, very nearly a perfect ride. And towards the end of the first half and towards the end of the ride, it meanders just a little bit, and you lose that intensity, you lose that sensation of speed just a little bit for a few seconds at two different points of Karen. Expedition GeForce, in the same sense, after that second overbank to the left, you do another overbank, and it flattens out, and it's a drop, but it's a straight drop. It doesn't have a hill. You sort of just slowly descend, and you're sort of just there for like 2 seconds. And then you do a sweeping right-hand turn. You go into a little bit of a crossover hill, which has a little bit of float, a little bit of lateral throw. It's not overly intense like the first part of the ride is. It's almost a very distinct rhythm where there are 3 acts of this ride. So you have the first drop, the second hill, the overbank, the third hill, the second overbank are very intense. You've got airtime on the drop. You've got positive G-forces at the bottom of the drop. You've got a ejector airtime on the second hill. Then you've got an overbank with some positive G-forces and some laterals. Then you've got a third airtime hill with amazing ejector airtime. Then you've got another overbank with some good positive and lateral G-forces. That's your first act. Your second act is sort of like, this is the part of the ride where we're just going to do some nifty maneuvers. We're going to do this little turn. We're going to do this shallow drop. We're going to do this crossover hill that's got a little bit of float, a little bit of lateral force. It's still exciting. It's still fun, but it's not out of this world intense like the first act is, right? It's a little bit to maybe breathe and catch your breath just a little bit. Then you hit another overbank turn, and then the third act is balls to the wall. You've got an incredible ejector bunny hill, which goes through the support structure of the second hill, an amazing head chopper effect, okay? Then you've got another bunny hill right after that, and then you do sort of your, after you've got that bunny hill, which is alongside of the bottom of the first drop, and then you do a left-hand turn there. And then after that, you've got 2 more consecutive bunny hills, amazing speed, amazing airtime, very powerful, incredible ejector airtime. And at the end of the second one, you come speeding into the brake run, and you hit the brake with a lot of speed, and you come to rest. So you've got amazing first drop, amazing second hill, overbank, amazing third hill, overbank. Then you've got sort of a they're not throwaways. I'm not trying to describe them in that sense in any way, but they are less intense moments where you have an overbank, a little bit of a drop, a turn, a crossover hill that's got a little bit of float to it, then an overbank, and then it's back to the way the first act was. So you've got 4 incredible airtime hills to finish off the ride. It's almost a perfect rhythm. And because I like overly intense rides, I like in-your-face intense rides, that middle part of the ride to me could be just a little bit more. But this ride is a 9.8, 9.9 out of 10, in my opinion. Untamed notwithstanding, if we pretend that Untamed didn't get built in 2019, this is the best ride in Europe that I've ridden. And I can understand why this was a Thrilling 32 champion at one point. And for me, it is a top 10 steel roller coaster. I questioned whether or not this ride would be good enough to be a top 10 ride because I wasn't sure how that middle part was going to be and if that was going to ruin the ride. It is a perfect rhythm of we're going to pummel you with everything we got. We're going to give you a few slightly less intense elements to catch your breath, but are still fun to go through. And then we're going to pummel you again with everything we got: positive B forces, airtime, lateral forces. We're going to throw everything and the kitchen sink at you in the final act before you come speeding into the brake run. And it's comfortable. It's re-rideable. We rode it in the rain. We rode this 10 times. We had ERT in the credits and did the dark ride. We went back and rode it 3 or 4 more times. I got to ride in that back left seat in the pouring rain for my very last ride, and that was a special experience to ride that ride in the driving rain, not being able to see and just knowing that airtime was coming over every single one of those hills. This is a top 10 roller coaster for me, for sure. I think I have it ranked number 8 overall on my top 10 steel list. And that's the list with like Manta and Nemesis and whatnot at the top there. So in terms of best roller coaster, just by my grading scale out of 80 points, this is a borderline top 5 roller coaster. This is certainly a top 10, top 5 roller coaster. Absolutely one of the best roller coasters in the world. No question.
Interesting. Yeah, there's not much I can really add to that because like you've answered all the questions that we've had. You know, we've looked at the POVs. We've looked at it multiple times over many years. We've had different opinions over those years as to what this is. So you finally got out there and rode it, and it seems to deliver.
It did not disappoint. And here's what I'll say. That middle part of the ride that looks like it sort of meanders a little bit, that ride on the ride does exactly what it looks like. So you can interpret that. Whether you interpret that as good or bad, I'm almost happy I watched the POV a couple times of this ride not long before we went there because I knew that part of the ride was there. And I knew that there was sort of this middle act where it's sort of a catch your breath. We're going to go over some calmer, less intense elements. I knew that was there. I was expecting it. I wasn't disappointed by that. My friend Chris, who was with us, I don't think he knew that part was there, and I think he was left wanting a lot more out of that middle part of the ride. For me, it was a perfect rhythm of go, 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 go. Okay, catch your breath. Okay, here we go. Here's the finale. Go, 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 go. It was a really nice rhythm. It was a really nice pace. It's a nearly perfect ride, in my opinion. I wish that little part was a little bit more intense, but I certainly can't knock it for everything else it does. I mean, that middle part of the ride is exactly kind of what it looks like if you look at picture videos, but everything else, the airtime hills, the overbank turns, the finale, the first drop, everything else is so much better than you could ever hope for it to be just based on those videos. And that's why this ride is so good.
Yeah, so I would expect it to do better in the Thrilling 32. However, I don't believe it's going to knock off the Champ.
And here's the thing. I mean, this is a ride that has historically been, top 5 the last several years, and it's been around 98%. But if you do the math, I have it 8 out of, say, 630. That's, if I do the quick math here, that's 98.7%.
Yeah.
So that's like right on par with what this ride has gotten. So typically this ride has been between 98 and 99% in terms of voting point percentage for the Thrilling 32, the Ride War Choice Awards. So me ranking it 8 out of 630 some coasters is right on par with what our voters have said year after year. So in that term, this ride to me exceeded expectations because I thought it had the possibility to be a disappointment, and it certainly was not. And it falls right in line with what everything we've heard about how good this ride is year after year after year. It meets and, in my opinion, exceeds those expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to Tripsdrill now.
Yes.
Not a whole lot of rides here. So why don't you go through some of the things that you found exciting about this place?
Right. So this is when I think of small Bavarian village in Germany, Tripsdrill is located in that exact type of area. We drove through all these little quaint Bavarian towns with the Bavarian German type buildings and houses. It's weird, right? This is kind of it's kind of weird. I'm going to borrow from RCDB a little bit because it has a really weird theme. So this park started around an old mill, and the translation is German for old wives' mills, right? So there's a big windmill in the middle of the park towards the front of the park there, which was an honest-to-goodness windmill. Other parts are themed around the wine industry. So there's actually a winery on site there, actually in the back. And if you look at the park page on our CDB, picture 4 is a picture of the rows of the winery there, which is up on the hill, which is visible right behind the park, off in the distance. So when you're back in the area of the park where the roller coasters are, again, excuse the pronunciation here, Vicente Sau, Caracho, and Mammut are all in the same area, as is the Jungbrunnen, which is the log flume I talked about earlier. Those are all in that back section of the park, and that hill with the winery and the building with the steeple there is sort of off in the background there, and it's all visible right there. It's a very, very pretty park. I would argue that in terms of natural scenery and natural beauty, this had to be probably the most beautiful park on the entire trip. It was, and one of the nice things we got to do as part of our trip, they gave us free wine glasses, shot glasses with the Tripsdrill Park logo on them. It was their 90th anniversary. Yes, 1929. So it was their 90th anniversary this year. So they gave us each shot glasses with the Tripsdrill 90th anniversary logo on them, and they also allowed us to take those shot glasses down into the basement of one of their wine buildings, and we got to do wine tastings toward the end of the trip. So that was really fun. And if you look through some of the pictures of the fountains and the flowers and just all the surroundings of this park, and even the buildings, if you look at picture 6 on the park page, you see how Vicente Sau and Jungbrunnen sort of both go through the Bavarian towers. And it's just very, very well themed, highly themed. Everything is just themed absolutely beautifully here. The park is absolutely gorgeous. I can't say enough nice things about just how beautiful this park is. The picture 53 is actually a picture up from that building looking down over the winery down into the park. That is really something. I've never seen that picture before. That is really, really cool looking. So let's talk about the coasters then. We had a few other rides here, but let's talk about the coasters. Rasender Tausendfüßler. It's German for racing millipede. That is their kiddie coaster. Just a big Zierer Tivoli large model, similar to the types of rides like Catwoman's whip at Six Flags New England, or a Blackbeard's train. I think it's called a Harley Quinn Crazy Train now, Great Adventure. But a very, very dense foliage around it, trees and bushes. Mammut is their wood coaster. So it is themed to the German redwood tree, the Mammutbaum. And what's interesting about this is this was the trains were built by Gerschlauer, and it was designed by Cordes Halsbau, which is interesting. It's listed as the only roller coaster built by them. So fine, Gerschlauer trains. Nothing overly exciting. It's got a couple of fun airtime hills where you get a little bit of float, some good turns. It's themed to sort of like a sawmill. There's a dark ride section where you go through like a sawmill before you enter the lift hill, and to get onto the lift hill, you drop underneath saw blades. So that's kind of cool. There is a little bit of theming here. The ride itself is nothing overly special. It's got a couple cool tunnels. It's not a rough ride. It's not an overly intense ride. A fun ride, sort of a once and done here. Of note, if you've ever seen the picture of the guy roller skating down the roller coaster, if you've seen that on Google, this is the ride that guy did that on. And I think it actually says that on the RCDB page. Let me look.
Yeah.
Okay, it does. Yeah. So, he skated Vicente Sal years before that too. I did not know that. So cool. But yeah, when you see the guy roller skating on the wooden roller coaster, it's the Mammut at Tripsdrill. Speaking of Vicente Sal, which is the, I believe, the original Gerschlauer roller coaster. If I look at RCDB, it's the first roller coaster by Gerschlauer. So this, I talked about it in Movie Park and Wallaby, Belgium, how Gerschlauer has the bobsleds model, which is really their version of a wild mouse. That's what this ride is. Does a lot of interacting with the building that the Jungbrunnen takes place in, and also has a couple of airtime hills and helixes at the end of the ride that are very close to the ground and actually sort of follow the topography of the hills and the flowers that are towards the end of the ride. This was a really, really fun ride. I like this a lot. These are the types of, when I think of a family roller coaster and family rides, this is the type of the ride that I think of. This is sort of in the vein of like a Fire Chaser Express, where I think a lot of parks in the U.S. would benefit from rides such as these. These Gerschlauer bobsled coasters are really a lot of fun, and this one was no exception and had a lot of cool theming. It almost looked like you were going to be scraping along the bushes and the foliage along the entire ride. So I really, really enjoyed this ride. Local dialect, and apparently it means fast rider or fast driver. So okay, that's what that means.
Hey, why not?
But a lot of fun there. Perhaps the most notable of the roller coasters is Catacho, which is their Gerschlauer launched Infinity coaster, opened in 2013. This is a lot of fun. This one was a lot of fun. Not quite on the level of like a Monster, but certainly has a lot of the similar feel to it. It's got an outside top hat after the launch, which is very cool. You get some good airtime there. It's got a couple of dive loops. The second dive loop actually is you sort of do a slow roll into it, and then you dive into it, and the bottom half of the dive loop is in a tunnel. So you do the roll part of it, and you're actually not far off the ground at all. And then when you go through the actual dive loop part of it, you're diving underground. Seeing if I can find a good picture of it.
18.
18, is that the one?
The one.
Oh yeah, so there you go. That's a good look at it. So you do sort of a half roll into a dive loop, and then you dive down into the tunnel, which is very, very cool. This has sort of a dark ride type thing to it at the beginning as well, similar to when I was describing Flug von Novgorod. Not quite as themed, but similar in nature. It does have the barrel roll before the launch. type deal, which is a lot of fun. A lot of falling out of your seat. This is an infinity coaster, so you've got the lap bars, not the shoulder harnesses. Certainly very smooth and very, very fun to ride. There's some good airtime on the ride as well. And again, 0 to 56 miles an hour in 1.6 seconds. So, a very powerful launch, even though the top speed is maybe not particularly impressive. Definitely an impressive acceleration there for sure. Perhaps the coolest part of this ride that's not on the ride itself, when you get off of the ride, there is an animatronic of a guy throwing up into a rusty barrel. So, and if you search it on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find it. I have a video of it, but it's this guy standing there, and he's like bent over a bucket, and he's like sort of rocking back and forth. And as you get off the ride, he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and he bends over into the bucket, and literally just red fluid spews out of his mouth into the bucket. If you're not into that sort of thing, it's quite gross. But again, that's going along with the boobs, right? I mean, none of our rides in America have boobs, and I'm pretty sure none of our rides have animatronics of guys throwing up on the exit path.
No, maybe a few haunts, but not rides.
Yeah, you're just left to sort of see that whenever the guests take part in that activity, right? I mean, that's pretty much it. But boy, that was a lot of fun. So that's it for the coasters. Picture 67, the very last one on Jericho, is a very good picture of that dive loop there. That element's a lot of fun. So there you go. If you're following along with us, that's another good look at it. The last thing to note is the Jungbrunnen, which is the German boob flume, right? So, maybe I can steal a little bit here. It talks about it here. The log flume, the theme is the fountain of youth, which I think is what Jungbrunnen translates to. Jungbrunnen, Jungbrunnen. I believe it loosely translates to fountain of youth. So here's the story. Are you looking this up, or are you getting confused?
I'm watching a POV as we speak.
Oh, okay. So you get in the log flume boats, which are shaped like bathtubs, and they have the feet on them like the old school bathtubs, and even the back of the boats have shower heads that come down. Yeah. And you go into it goes through some of the Bavarian like buildings and whatnot, and that's all well and good. But the highlight of this ride is you go into a big dark building and you look off to the left, and there's a bunch of animatronics of old ladies with saggy boobs and wrinkly skin in the fountain, right? And then you go to the other side of the building, and then they're not old ladies anymore. They are young, buxom, beautiful, very perky women, and there's tons of them, Andy. This is your type of ride. Rob Dole, if there is a reason to go to Europe, you want to go ride the Jungbrunnen at Erlebnis Park Tripsdrill.
And I'm not a huge log flume guy. Like I tend to skip them, but this is one that I probably would not skip at all.
This is really something, and this is a ride. We knew about this ride, and we knew what this ride was, and boy, this is really something, and this is just something that you would just never see over here in the States. It's just not something you would see.
Mothers would be writing letters and.
Oh my God, yeah. And if you don't want to watch the POV like Andy did, you can find pictures. If you want, there's plenty of them. Actually, Theme Park Review has quite a few on there, because this ride has a dedicated page on Theme Park Review. So shout out to Rob there for having the Jungbrunnen page there. But it's so funny, and it's like the boats are bathtubs, and they've got shower heads, and it's even in the station. There is an old lady in a bikini drying off with a towel.
I saw that on RCDB.
and the station, the floor of the station is bathroom tiles.
Oh.
Like it's the funniest thing. This is exactly the type of thing that we got on this European experience that you can't get in the United States. This is the type of stuff that set some of these little parks. Tripsdrill's a little park. There's 4 roller coasters. They're building 2 more for 2020. It's a very quaint little park. It's certainly, if you're just a roller coaster person, this isn't a park that you would necessarily seek out. This is one that you might skip. But if you are looking for a fun theme park experience and a fun experience at a theme park where you can do the winery, you can do the roller coasters, you can do the ride like this. They have one of those sky roller flat rides. They've got a lot of different fun flat rides. They have a star flyer as well. They have a lot of fun, unique things here. We had a meal there as well. Got some schnitzel, which was very, very good. This was just a place that we had a wonderful, wonderful experience at. And in terms of roller coasters, I mean, Karato is good. This isn't necessarily a park that you would rush back to in terms of roller coasters, but in terms of having a fun theme park experience for, say 3 to 5 hours. I mean, this is as good as it gets for a small park like this. This was just an absolutely wonderful place.
Well, I think that wraps us up here for tonight. Another great 2 small parks, but 2 parks that it sounds like should be on your list to go to in Europe. So we got the last 2 left here, and these are the 2 heavy hitters.
We've saved the 2. We started off with a bang with Phantasialand, and I told Andy, I said, everybody wants to hear about Europa Park, and I really want to talk about Efteling. So we're going to save those 2 for last, and those are coming up here because those, in my opinion, are the 2 biggest parks and the 2 best parks that we need to talk about.
So, as always, I am Andy Robarchek from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, right, Warriors.
See you tomorrow, guys.